and this one is coming from Wayne and Jasmine Agena. And they say, my wife and I are thinking of retiring to either Maui or the Big Island in a couple of years. We're Kama'ainas returning to Hawaii after 40 years. Kama'aina is a typical term that's being used to say someone who's local, has acclimated to the local culture. Returning to Hawaii after 40 years. Some may consider the subject distasteful, but during our research, we came across some information about wastewater issues in Hawaii, specifically cesspools. How bad is it on each island, and is there information as to where the concentration is? We would rather settle where there is county water, county sewage, and electricity to avoid that type of situation. So Heidi, I've never heard about this sort of on Maui, but you know Maui. What is there a cesspool situation or concern on Maui, areas to avoid?
Well, not necessarily areas to avoid, but definitely something to be aware of, especially when you're looking at properties in rural areas. You'll find cesspools at older properties, and most of them on Maui are located upcountry. Now, according to the Hawaii State Department of Health website, there's approximately 88,000 cesspools in the state. There's about 12,000 on Maui. I believe most of them are on the Big Island. But a cesspool is essentially a hole in the ground that receives and holds sewage. And a cesspool doesn't filter waste. Some of them can pose a risk to water quality seeping into the ground. Now, the water source from upcountry, where a lot of the cesspools are, is actually surface water from the rainforest. So the water upcountry would not necessarily be affected. It would be aquifers at lower elevations, potentially. In general, water on Maui is safe to drink. I'm not personally aware of any water issues. I know some people that are sensitive to water quality, they can do an extra level of filtration at home. But in regards, just back to the whole cesspool thing, in 2017, there was a state law that was passed that requires residents who have cesspools, they have to replace them by 2050. So if you buy a house now with a cesspool, in 30 years, you might need to upgrade that to a septic. Well, you will by law, unless they change it. And if you're planning on building a new dwelling or getting a building permit to get an addition, you're also going to need to upgrade that cesspool to septic. And I understand this can cost $20,000 to $40,000. So it's definitely something you want to be aware of in your due diligence period when you're looking at that. But if you don't like the idea of cesspools, there's plenty of areas that you can buy and own on Maui that have county water and sewer or have septic. So it just depends which area you're looking in.
Thank you, Heidi. You obviously really well prepared to answer that question. Thank you. That's a lot of great detail. Better than my COVID update, I might say. So, Dylan, Heidi mentioned Big Island, and Big Island's like the land of the wild, wild west over here. Where people do all kinds of things, especially in the Puna district, where you have homes that are living off the grid and living off of rainwater that they catch on their roofs, this catchment system. What's the situation with the cesspools on the Big Island?
We have a ton of them. So that's let me start with, I don't want to come off as pro cesspool, but it's not a big deal. I've lived on them my whole entire life pretty much, and it's a pretty low maintenance, easy way to deal with wastewater. I mean, as Heidi said, it's just a hole in the ground that has a concrete cap on it, and your wastewater goes into it. So your other option is a septic tank, which now you have to build if you are going to do any new construction, which most people are familiar with a septic system. We have very limited connected sewer neighborhoods here on the Big Island. So you would greatly reduce your availability of places to shop if you use that as a restriction. I've never really encountered anybody who does, because at the end of the day, it really shouldn't be a deterrent. A lot of times a cesspool is the lowest. I mean, one, there's no cost. There's really no maintenance. And as long as you don't pour any crazy stuff down your drain, it pretty much, because of our porous volcanic foundation and soil, it just drains into the ground. So You don't really have to pump it ever. Sometimes you do, but it's rare. It's not like a septic system, which is going to need regular maintenance from time to time. So in my advice is don't use it as a deterrent. You do have to consider, as Heidi said, the 2050 conversion law. But in my opinion, that's a feel-good law that is pretty much going to be unenforceable for most people, because if you have built out older neighborhoods and you have homes right next to each other and the cesspool is right between, and you have a retaining wall that for the yard, I mean, people are not going to be able to get machinery into these homes. And there's going to be thousands of people who would be in violation of the law because it's not going to be practical to actually do the conversion. So that's something the state's going to have to deal with when the time comes. And are you going to be forcing 80-year-old ladies on a fixed income who have been in the house for 60 years to convert with this huge cost because of this law? Or are you going to put them in jail? I mean, I don't see how they're gonna actually enforce that law, because it's very impractical. I mean, it's a good intent, but actually implementing it's going to be very hard to do when the time comes.
Thanks, Dylan. As hearing you and Heidi kind of go into some of these details and about this law in 2050, if I got that right, really, again, it really makes me appreciate having you folks here with this knowledge, because this is something that
And one more thing about the concern about water. So there was a big movement here 2 years ago, I think it was, to like designate our aquifer, some special federal designation. The national parks are trying to do this. So there was a bunch of community meetings and a bunch of experts that came out here to speak about groundwater and different things. And the interesting thing, I don't know about the other islands, but definitely on the Big Island, the water that we drink is from wells that are like 1,000+ feet down. Yes, so you have to drill at about 1,000, between 1,000 and 2,000 feet of elevation. They drill these wells down and they pump the water up. And it's basically water that sits on it's a lens of fresh water that sits on the salty water that's below it, because that water permeates all the way through the island. And so they tap into that lens, and then that's where our water comes from. And it's extremely clean, because they have done studies, and based on like the isotopes or whatever, they can see that this water fell on the mountains like tens of thousands of years ago, like 50,000 years ago is when this water actually fell in the mountains. It's been filtering through the volcanic rock all of these years before it gets down into this lens. So there's no way that a cesspool, which is 10 feet deep, is going to be permeating into our drinking water, which is 1,000 feet below and at higher elevations where there isn't very much population. So that isn't like a practical, immediate concern. I mean, not in anybody's lifetime in the next couple thousand years. So.
Yeah, excellent. I always was blown away when I realized in Hawaii that all of our drinking water, every single drop of our drinking water, is filtered rainwater. Filtered rainwater that's gone through thousands of years of volcanic rock filtering. I always kind of tripped out about that. Scott, what's Oahu? Do we have a cesspool issue on Oahu at all? What's up with that?
Yeah, you'll get them. Well, the EPA obviously is trying to go away from the cesspools, and they had a ban on them in Hawaii, more or less on the commercial side, trying to convert them. And then now you have the residential law that Heidi's talking about. But yeah, along that windward. So if you get close to the ocean, then you sometimes have you could potentially have some leaching issues. But my first 2 development projects were actually done on septic systems. And, I had to do the research on that and learn about it, which was Dylan hit the nail on the head with how are you going to convert these, because a cesspool is a hole in the ground. You don't need a lot of width. With a septic system, you need a leach field, and then you need you got to do percolation rates with absorption of the ground, how it absorbs that water as it goes through the system. And my Eva Beach one had to be pretty large, whereas the Hauula one was much smaller, because the ground could absorb it really well. So you got to try to convert that where you need 40, 50 feet in 2 directions to be able to put this leach field and stuff, and you don't have it. What are you going to do? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But the interesting thing, I wouldn't poo-poo it. To me, it's not a bad system. The first one, when I went to go put in all the sod and Eva, and I was running my water every day, 5 times a day to keep the grass going to get it to where it needed to go, I thought my water bill was going to be through the roof, and it was $30. And I'm looking at my regular house bill going, why is this $125? And I only run the water, to water the yard every other day, and this one's so much less. It's because the sewer charge is so much more expensive, and the water is actually dirt cheap over here. So there's pros and cons. The septic system, if you're able to get on septic, is not a bad system to be on. The Windward Coast past Kaneohe all the way around to the North Shore, there is no city sewer. You can't tap into it, so you're having to either be on cesspool or septic system.
That is,
you got to consider you pay your sewer bill on how much water you use, not how much water you put in the system. So you could be spraying the water on the street, but you're paying your sewer bill for that, even though the water's going to feed your grass.
Which I'm surprised more people haven't caught the rainwater from their gutters to disperse as lawn sprinklers, but that's separate topic.
Catchment comes to Oahu. Thanks, Scott. I did not know about that on Oahu. At that, where does it start? You said how it's the septic only starts after
Kaneohe all the way through the North Shore. And even that one I did in Eva Beach, which is a very busy developed area. There's that one road, Old Fort Weaver Road, behind the hospital where I bought that lot and we developed it. And I'm going, wait, what? There's no city sewer over here? So
man, yeah. Cool. Great facts from the experts. More than I ever wanted to know about cesspools, but now I feel like I'm fairly well educated on cesspools.